Hello, everyone. My name is Tanya Obradovic, and I'm working for Eclipse Foundation as Jakarta EE Program Manager. Of course, we're all here beyond excited to be here with you and to share the news about Jakarta EE8. Today is a big day, and we have a big JakartaOne Livestream conference. And we're starting off with our MC Adam Bean and our first presentation of the day, which is with Kevin Sutter. So I will hand it over to Adam, and he will take it from here.
Yeah, hello. My name is Adam Bean, and I'm working for Adam Bean. And I hope I will enjoy the next 15 hours. And our first presenter is Kevin Sutter. And it's an well-known Java EE and J2EE friend. You did, I think, Kevin, you did a lot of JPA work back then. And now, yes. And now you are focused on the lightweight stuff like MicroProfile, Jakarta EE, Open Liberty, and architecting stuff, right?
Correct.
So now let's go. I'm really curious about the dummEE stuff for Jakarta.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you. Okay, I'm getting an echo.
Okay, then?
There is no echo on our side.
Okay, so it's just me.
You come through really well.
Okay. Okay, so this echo is going to drive me nuts. Okay, now I can't hear anything. Okay. I'm gonna have
we can hear you, Kevin, no problem.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, I'm sorry, I can't do this. It's echoing for me. Okay, can you still hear me?
No? Now you're echoing. But you don't. Are you maybe having two browsers with the Crowdcast?
Maybe. That's it.
Okay.
Okay, now. That's much better. Thank you very much. I had signed into too many things. Okay, this is good. Thank you. Okay, no so let's get started now. Okay, so well, first of all, thank you for allowing me to be the first presentation here today for Jakarta EE Live. This is a big day for us. You're going to hear a lot of different presentations today related to of course, our new release, and then the individual technologies that are part of Jakarta EE. So I'm going to be starting to kind of get everybody up to speed. So this is a good introductory course to give a little bit of background on Jakarta EE. I do have to point out, I've been, kind of practicing this pitch with various people. This is not a real book. I kind of threw this together as just kind of an example, to show that it's kind of one of those, for dummies, type of presentation. And people thought that this book looked a little too real, and you can't find it on Amazon. So don't go looking for it. This was just a, little thing that I threw together because I thought it was kind of cute. So just to be aware. So I'm going to do a very brief history. Many people on this call are probably already aware of Jakarta EE and where it came from, but I got to get everybody kind of on the same page. So I'm going to do a brief history. The majority of my talk is going to be talking about the specifications, the APIs, and the TCKs that we have been generating over the last several months in order to release Jakarta EE8. We have some big news on the compatible implementations that I want to share with you, and then I will touch on what's coming next. What's beyond Jakarta EE8. So, first of all, a little bit of history. This chart here, when I say we, I'm from IBM. We've been using this chart here since JavaOne of 2015. One of our guys here at IBM, he had a little keynote, and he started off his presentation with this chart. And he was asking at that time, Java EE, Enterprise Java, is it relevant or is it an elephant? Where are we going with Java EE? I mean, microservices was just starting about that time. And so does Java EE still come into play at that time? So this was 2015 when we were first presenting this. We, the industry, Oracle, everybody, the warning signs were kind of ignored with Java EE. After Java EE8 came out, there was a lull. There was very little activity, whether it was from Oracle or the other companies. We really didn't have a direction beyond Java EE8. There was talk sometimes, and sometimes the talk would get started and then it would die off. And we'd see some activity happening on JSRs and then it would die off. And there'd be some definition of Java EE9 and then it would die off. And we were just kind of like, okay, what are we going to do? Now the industry, we have a large set of customers that are dependent on enterprise Java. So what are we going to be doing to go forward? So in 2016, just to give a little bit of history here, some of us industry leaders, we got together and said, okay, Java EE, we don't know what's happening with that. It's there. We have Java EE8, but what's really going to be happening with it? And so we started to look at microservices. What can we do for microservices in the enterprise Java environment? And we came up with this idea of MicroProfile. So we established a community at Eclipse, and we brought in a lot of different participants, both industry players as well as individuals, and we started this MicroProfile initiative. It has taken off extremely well. I mean, since 2016. So basically that was JavaOne 2016 to 2019. In 3 years' time, we have produced 9 platform releases and like 21 or 22 component releases. So we've been very active in this environment for coming up with these components, these features that help people with developing microservices in an enterprise Java environment. I mentioned that we've had a lot of participants with MicroProfile, and we have several compatible implementations. I'm personally involved with OpenLiberty and WebSphere Liberty, but we also have implementations from Red Hat and Payara, Apache, even Oracle with Helidon.io. That's an Oracle implementation, an Oracle open source project that is utilizing some of the capabilities of MicroProfile. So we have a lot of industry that was interested in what we were doing with MicroProfile. And this turned out to be kind of interesting because what happened here, MicroProfile was getting so much attention that we kind of claim that this kind of woke up Oracle. And it says, well, wait a minute. We still have this Java EE thing, and MicroProfile is really kind of taking off. And look at what they're doing in the open source environment. So maybe we should be contributing Java EE to the open source environment. And that's what started Jakarta EE. So yes, it was 2 years ago, 2017, but it sounds like a long time, but as you'll see, there's been a lot of work that has been put into place in order to finally release Jakarta EE8. Now you'll notice that at the Eclipse Foundation, we have the 2 leading programming models for developing cloud-native Java. We've got the MicroProfile initiative, and now we have Jakarta EE. And they are very much related. I'm going to touch on this a little bit later. There's some synergy between the two that we're going to, be capitalizing on, and there are some things that we still have to work on. But having them both at Eclipse is fantastic news, and it's going to be good for the industry. One thing I wanted to point out, even though Java EE as a source code was contributed to Eclipse, Oracle is still protecting some of their Java trademarks, and I'll be touching on that a little bit later. That will affect us after Jakarta EE 8, and I'll touch on that towards the end of the presentation. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about the specifications, the APIs, and the TCKs. So this is a chart that the Eclipse Foundation put together, and I've used it a couple of times with very good results, because what this shows is how did we do stuff before with the JCP and Java EE, and how are we doing it with Jakarta EE? So you'll notice here, like right off the top, although some of this has been changing along the way, Java EE was really specification first, especially the early specifications. It was, we'll do the specification first, and then we'll try to write the code to see if we can implement that spec. With Jakarta EE, we want code first, or at least simultaneous with the specification, because we want to be able to prove that everything is implementable and testable right off the bat. In the past, the various JSRs were led by a specification lead, and that lead was appointed. It was either Oracle or one of the participants of the JCP. They were designated as a specification lead. And what was special about that is that then all of the IP flowed through that specification lead and then back to Oracle. In this case with Jakarta EE, even though we have project leads, they are not designated as specification leads. The specifications are defined in a collaborative environment, and we have identified the appropriate licensing agreements so that it is all collaborative, and then the IP can then easily be distributed to the participants. In the past, the documents in the TCKs are closed source. There were some exceptions to those. Some of the items that were produced by Red Hat and IBM, they were open sourced, but the actual final results of the documents, and especially the TCKs, they were closed. Now with Jakarta EE, this is really special, especially the TCKs being open source, having full access to the source code, being able to look at the test cases and understanding them. This has been key, and this is going to come up later when I talk about compatible implementations and how quickly we have been able to get through some of the testing. In the past, there was a single reference implementation. Now you'll see that when we release Jakarta EE, there are multiple compatible implementations. You're going to see that towards the end of my presentation. And there was a certification process in the past in order to certify your application servers to be Java EE compliant. We do have a defined certification process, but it is self-certification that we're doing within Jakarta EE. Okay, so specification process. I just want to touch on this. I'm not going to take you through all of the text. Once these presentations are available, you can follow the links if you want to read all of the boring detail. But what I want to highlight is when we're going through the specification process, there's certain things that we have to create, and we have to create a specification. We have to create JavaDoc that corresponds to the API. We have to create a TCK, a test environment, and we have to provide a compatible implementation that shows that the specification is implementable. So those are the key pieces that have to be created, and we'll talk about each of those shortly. So just to give you a little bit of background on the amount of work, and most people are saying, I don't care how much work it took, what are you producing? And I'm going to get to everything that we're producing, but I do want to point out that there was a lot of activity that had to be done because we wanted checks and balances. We didn't want any one particular person or any one particular organization to be able to have control. So we had a lot of reviewing, a lot of approving, a lot of meetings, going through this information to ensure that we are creating the proper specifications, APIs, Java docs, TCKs, compatible implementations, and everybody is reviewing all of this to ensure that we have consistent results all the way across. And I do want to point out the very bottom bullet, a few process adjustments along the way. This is what was really nice because, as you know, up front, we kind of define various processes, the specification process, the TCK process, you know, the various processes that we need to do in order to go through this delivery. You know, we discovered along the way that, oh man, we were a little too stringent on that. I mean, one example, our original review process said that we needed 30 days to allow for a review as a minimum. And it's just kind of like, okay, that's too long. We're in constant communication with everybody. I mean, granted, we want to talk with other people within our respective organizations, but we don't need 30 days for that. So we cut that down to 14. And so we were able to do this because we're working collaboratively, we're working through the process, and we want to make sure that it works for all of us as we move along. Okay, so let's touch on specifications. Now, what is really cool is because overnight, we actually completed all of this activity, got all of the, you know, I's dotted and T's crossed. So actually, I'm going to be jumping out here, and hopefully this all works. Yep. So now you'll see this is the live page for all of our specifications. So you can see as I scroll down here, all of the various specifications that we have been working on for Jakarta EE. Okay, so as an example, I'm going to just pop back up here so we can walk through one together. If you pick Jakarta EE platform, it comes up. Right now, we only have Jakarta EE8. As we develop additional platforms, there will be additional entries on the screen for Java EE9, Java EE10, whatever. So I'm going to click on this. And now we have a one-stop shop for all of the information related to Jakarta EE platform. So if you want to look at the specification document, you can click here and up comes the PDF. So here's the PDF for the whole specification document for the platform. Okay, if you have looked at Java EE, you're going to find this. It's not identical, but it's as close to being consistent as we could make it. If you like HTML better, you can jump in here, and here's all of the same type of text all the way through, same type of pictures. It's just in a single page HTML format. There's also the Java doc link. So if you click on the Java doc, now you have access to all of the Java doc for Jakarta EE8. You also have access to the TCK. And so now I'm not going to download it, but that link would download the full TCK for Jakarta EE8. And then you've got the various SHA signatures and stuff, so you can verify that you're running with the appropriate version. The other thing that you can see here, we've got the ballots. So all of the voting positions for everyone that is on the specification committee, how did they vote in support of this platform? And then the very bottom entry is the compatible implementation. Now, one thing to point out here, the compatible implementation listed here is the one that was submitted in order to support the specification. So when we define a specification, you have to define the specification, the API, the TCK, and a compatible implementation. So we used the Eclipse Glassfish implementation as the compatible implementation for the Jakarta EE8 specification. Okay, I'm going to talk about other compatible implementations towards the end of the presentation, but I wanted to point out why there's only one specified on that page. Okay, so one-stop shop. You can go here and find out all the information about the various specifications. Okay, so because I didn't know whether or not we would have all the pages up and running, I had these as backup, so I'm just going to kind of go through this because I already talked about it. Okay, so the content of these specifications. Now, I showed you the platform one, and it's very complete. It's very much like Java EE. The platform and web profile specifications are complete. They came from Oracle. They were contributed. We have massaged them, made them pretty, and put them into a format that is readable and consumable. Bean validation and CDI are in the same boat. They're also complete. Now, the thing that we're a little light on is that all the rest of the component specifications, so if you're talking about JPA and persistence, JMS, messaging, all of those are skeletal specifications at this point. They're very brief. It's got, basically a title and a scope statement, and then we're going to rely on the Java doc as the specification for Jakarta EE8. I know we all agree it's not complete, but it is a start. And the rest of the specifications from Oracle are being contributed, and they're going through the final phases of the, clearance, the copyright, the IP clearances, and eventually they will become part of Jakarta EE8 and we'll have a more complete specification library. But until that happens, we're just going to rely on these skeletal specifications and the Java doc for most of the components. Okay, APIs. I skipped that on the other page. At the bottom of each of the specification pages are the Maven coordinates. You can click on that Maven coordinate and it will take you out to Maven and show you the results. It'll have the API, the sources, and the Java doc files. So all three of them are available via that link. Now, maybe you want to kind of explore a little bit. So if we take a look here, okay, second, lost my mouse. Go live here again. Okay, so make that a little bit bigger. Okay, so this shows the hierarchy of the Jakarta namespace. We could go into here, we could take a look at the platform namespace, and in here we've got the Jakarta EE API 8.0, and here are all the files. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. If you just like to navigate and go around and search and take a look around. The other way of doing it is doing a search. And so if you go out to Maven Central and do a search on jakarta.splat, this will come up with all of the group IDs that start with Jakarta. And this is another nice way of taking a look. So if we go back out to the same location that I did, the Jakarta platform, maybe I should make this a little bigger as well, make it a little bit easier to read. You can see Jakarta EE8 API at version 8.0.0, and here's the information related to that API out in Maven Central. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about the TCKs. In the past, in order to get in order to get access to the TCKs for Java EE, you had to sign a license, some type of license with Oracle. You had to get some type of legal agreement in place that would allow you access to the TCKs. And even then, even when you did get access to the TCKs, you had to be careful on who actually got to look at the TCKs and work with them. This was not helpful to a lot of organizations. There were a lot of organizations that were interested in being Java EE compatible, but either they didn't have the resources to sign a licensing agreement, or maybe there was some other disagreement that didn't allow that type of licensing to occur, or whatever the reason, there were a lot of organizations that were not able to get at these TCKs. Okay, so now look at Jakarta EE. We have all of the TCKs now available. Keep losing my mouse. I have to keep going back. So let's go out here. You'll notice here that now here are all of the different components that make up Jakarta EE. And you can go into one of these folders, and there's version 8. And here are all of the TCKs. Now, you'll notice multiple names. We kind of had a hiccup right at the end where some of them were named Eclipse Dash, and the ultimate goal was to have them called Jakarta Dash. And because some of them were already promoted, we decided, okay, let's just have them both out there. So we're using this, just renaming. They're the exact same content, whether you pick Eclipse Dash or Jakarta Dash, but they're both out there. So now here's access. If you click on one of these, you can get the complete TCK zip file. And that zip file contains everything that you need to know in order to run the TCK. It's got a user's guide. Most of them have readmes. If it needs certain utilities in order to execute the TCK, it'll outline all of the requirements so that you can get set up and executing the TCK. It's very nice. As I mentioned, you can go through here and pick whatever ones you wanted. If you only wanted to test concurrency, for example, you could come in here, and here's how to run the TCK with all the test cases in order to test against concurrency 1.1. Okay, and that just shows that. Oh, should point out the little thing at the yellow at the bottom. So even though you have access to all these TCKs and everybody can get access to them, can execute them and play with them, there's still some separate additional branding requirements if you want to be branded as being Jakarta EE compliant. They're pretty easy to get. So don't think of this as a big hurdle. They're fairly easy, but I just want to point out that just because you can test against these TCKs, you can't just say that you're Jakarta EE compliant unless you go through the branding requirements. And I've got a link there, quite easy to use a brand. Okay, compatible implementations. This is where it was fun. So I got to start. I'm going to back up just a little bit because I want to talk about MicroProfile and Jakarta EE. So if you remember on the previous chart, it had shown Eclipse, MicroProfile, and then Java EE was off to the left on my screen. Well, now that we have Java EE moved over to Eclipse under Jakarta EE, that eventually can be the new stack. Right now, Java EE and Jakarta EE 8, they're equivalent. So if we say that MicroProfile sits on top of Java EE 8, the 4 technologies at the bottom, they will also work on top of Jakarta EE 8 with those 4 technologies. Now, maybe at some time, there will be additional Jakarta EE technologies that we will be dependent on, or some new revision. Maybe CDI comes out with a 2.1 release that's Jakarta EE 8. And then maybe we'll have to modify MicroProfile to be more Jakarta EE compliant than Java EE, but we'll look at that down the road. So our goal from the beginning of this exercise, and this is one of the questions that kind of came up earlier on the chat, what are the new features of Jakarta EE 8? And at this point, there are none. They are functionally equivalent between Java EE 8 and Jakarta EE 8. What we needed to prove is that all of the stuff from Java EE 8, all of the specifications, the code, the APIs, the TCKs, everything we can move over to Jakarta EE, and we can use an open source process and environment in order to create a new release of Jakarta EE 8. So the second bullet there, We even have some existing warts and wrinkles. So we hit a couple of hiccups with Jakarta EE 8 late in the cycle. And we said, okay, but they existed in Java EE 8 as well. So we had to kind of adjust that a little bit to figure out, okay, how much of this do we really need over there? And, I'll say it's 99.9% the same between Java EE 8 and Jakarta EE 8. And the reason that we did that was the third bullet, because we wanted, as soon as Jakarta EE 8 became available, we wanted it easy for the existing Java EE 8 app servers to be Jakarta EE 8 compliant. So that was one of our goals. And we were able to do it quite quickly with Open Liberty, which I'll show you. And there's more of them in the queue that are going to be coming onto the web page. So I think we have done a good job at keeping this consistent between the two. So in order to claim yourself as being Jakarta EE 8, you need to do a certification request. And I'm going to just take you out to take a look at one. This is the one that we filed for Open Liberty. And there's a certain format that you have to adhere to. You have to indicate, well, who's the organization, what version of the product that you are trying to certify. And all of these are links. So it would take you out to the specific implementation. What specification is being tested? Which TCK was being used? Now, one thing that you'll notice, this is 8.0.1. This is one of those little hiccups that we found late in the Jakarta EE 8 cycle. And so we actually respun the TCK for the platform in order to pick up one more fix. So we actually have an 8.0.0 version of the TCK, and we have an 8.0.1 version of the TCK. And both of them are usable for testing your compatible implementation. You have a link for the test results, and I'll show that in a little bit. If there's other additional certification requirements, so right now, dependency injection, CDI, and bean validation, they were produced by Red Hat, and they had their own TCK requirements. And so we have those, you have to test those in addition to the overall test bucket for the platform. You have to talk a little bit about your runtime. What are you using for the Oracle or for the Java environment? If there's anything special with the databases that you're using, whether or not you accept the licensing. And in this particular case, we had a signature test that needed a challenge. And then you can see, I'll just quickly breeze through here, you can see the discussion that was happening on this after we submitted it. So the end goal is to get this little thing right here that says accepted. And so we submitted the certification, and after the review and people took a look at it, it was accepted, and then that allows the certification request to go forward. So before I get off of this page, let me show you this. So one of the things that you have to do is provide a URL for the TCK results. So this page is out on our Open Liberty website. You can see here, openliberty.io. Let me get this a little bit bigger again, make it a little bit easier to read. And a lot of the same information as the certification request. You know, what version of the product, what version of the spec, the TCK that's in use. But the unique thing here is at the bottom. So here's where we include all of the test results. So when you're doing the platform test, I don't know how many of you are familiar with it. It's almost 50,000 tests that are run against your application server. And so the results of all of those tests are posted here on this page. Okay, this is the TCK results chart. We just went through that. So here's our big announcement. This just came live overnight. And so here's our, the page is Jakarta.EE compatibility. And let's just go out there just to show that it really is live. And you can see that right now we have 2 products listed. we have Eclipse Glassfish and the Open Liberty release, and both of them are full platform compatible and web profile compatible. Now, also late yesterday, the Wildfly project, they submitted certification requests for their Wildfly product to be Jakarta EE 8 compliant. And we just didn't have the time to go through all of the verification overnight. The certification requests have been accepted, so I'm guessing we just have a little bit more paperwork and a little bit more website to update, and they'll be listed here as well. I'm also assuming, I know from talking with them, I think Pyara is coming. Tommy has some plans down the road. So we're going to see many more application servers being listed as Jakarta EE 8 compatible. Okay, so what comes next after Jakarta EE 8? Okay, so this is kind of a wordy chart. One of the things you can see that, I didn't know exactly when we would be announcing Jakarta EE 8, so I just, I updated that to show that it is today. And by the way, there's a keynote later today, and I guess in about 4.5 hours, something like that. And many of the participants within our working group, within the Jakarta EE working group, will be on board with that keynote address and talking about our participation and what are we doing in this environment. So I would highly recommend that you pay attention to that particular session. So what comes after Jakarta EE 8? If you've been paying attention to some of the work or some of the blog posts and stuff that have been happening, the biggest hurdle that's going to be in front of us is the javax namespace is frozen. So I mentioned early on how Oracle is still protecting some of their Java trademarks, and they have included javax in this protection. So this means that moving forward, we have to move to a new namespace for all of the APIs. And I have a separate chart that'll be talking about this, but that's something to keep in mind. That's going to be something that affects us post Jakarta EE 8. The question is, do we do it all right away in Jakarta EE 9, or is it going to be spread out over several? And so I've got another chart or two to talk about that. And we have a few other things. We have to make sure that we're not using the acronyms incorrectly from Oracle. We did a lot of that scrubbing in the specifications as we came forward, and as we get more of the specification source code into Eclipse, we'll have to do more of that scrubbing just to make sure that we are utilizing those acronyms appropriately. And then the bottom bullet there, just to emphasize, the MicroProfile community and the Jakarta EE community, I had a chart from a previous presentation that I probably should have included here. The main participants in the community, they are really overlapping between MicroProfile and Jakarta EE. So if anybody thinks that we're competing and butting heads, just throw that out the window. We are working together. We're trying to figure out the right solution for MicroProfile and Jakarta EE. We have a little bit different processes. Like I mentioned, we have done how many? 9 platform releases of MicroProfile and 22 component releases in the last 3 years. It's taken us 1.5 to 2 years to do one release here. Now that we have the whole process in place, we're going to be able to do a much quicker turnaround for Jakarta EE, but are we going to be able to match what we've been doing with MicroProfile? So that's some of the stuff that we have to figure out, and we are working together with the Eclipse Foundation and both of the communities, and we will get this figured out eventually. Okay, so the big thing here, javax to Jakarta namespace. We have to do something different. I even put the example in here. If you have a simple update to any new value, whether you're adding a new value or you're modifying the name, any simple update that has to move to a Jakarta namespace. The javax namespace, everything associated with it is frozen with Java EE8. We can continue to use them with Jakarta EE8, but any changes require a move to Jakarta. So the big question is, okay, do we do it like a Band-Aid? Do we do the big bang and say, okay, this is going to hurt, but let's just do it all at once? And we're going to move everything that's in Jakarta EE8 and move it to the new Jakarta namespace. So that's one way to look at it. Now, there are two variations that I listed here. One of them says everything that's in Jakarta EE8, we're going to move to Jakarta all at once. Or the other one is just a slight variation where we say, well, most everything, because there's a few technologies in Jakarta EE8 that are stabilized and no one is really using them. So why should we move those forward? Should we just cut those off now and then move that forward? But that's such a small piece. It really is basically saying, should we be moving everything all at once in one big release? The other approach that's getting a lot of discussion as well is an incremental approach. So instead of doing everything, let's just do the components that are required. So if we have, let's say JaxRS, because I know that they're a very active community, and they want to do a new release of JaxRS for Jakarta EE9. Okay, well then they would have to make changes to be in the Jakarta namespace. And then if there's any dependencies on them, or through them, then maybe they would have to change as well. But, let's just do the ones that are required instead of doing everything all at once. Another idea that has been proposed is the idea of extending the javax namespace. And this is very similar to what we did with MicroProfile, where we had the base features from Java EE, and some of those other features from MicroProfile were just extensions of the capabilities in Java EE. So maybe we can do something like that. It's another alternative that's being discussed. And of course, the bottom link there could be many other variations to this. And so this bottom link will just take you to our whole discussion. And so you could do a new PR if you have a third, fourth, fifth idea for what we do with this namespace move. Feel free, open up a PR and let's discuss it and see if it meshes with some of our current ideas or not. So we are looking for community input. So I've been talking a little bit about the content of these various releases, and we also have to look at the timeline. So one thing that we are probably, we're kind of wondering, do we do this change for the Jakarta namespace? Do we do it all at once, big bang, or do we do the incremental? And one of the things that has come up is maybe it's going to come down to the ability of these different components to step up to this work. If we do a big bang, that means every one of the components has to do this work. And that means you have to update your specification, your APIs, your TCKs, compatible implementations, all the tools, all the helpful things in the IDEs. Everything has to be done all at once. That's a huge effort. And do we have the resources signed up in order to actually do all of this work? So that's one way to look at it. Now, if we look at the incremental way of producing it, then maybe there's only a few components that can sign up for that work. Maybe, I'm just going to throw out names. JaxRS, persistence, and JSF, Java server faces. Jakarta, caught myself, Jakarta server faces. So maybe those are the only ones that could sign up to do the work. And then along, maybe that's the content of Jakarta EE9, and maybe that's our incremental approach. But then on the other hand, if we get a lot of components that are raising their hand and saying, yes, we can do this, we want to do this, and then you look at the ripple effect of the dependencies, then maybe the big bang is the approach that we're going to be doing because we've got enough people signed up to help us out. So, question at the bottom, how do we decide? And that's where we need help from all of you. I put several links here. The platform project, that's the project that's going to be defined, or that will be defining the content of the platform. So as we are looking at Jakarta EE9, Jakarta EE10, that's the project that's going to be responsible. So if you have an interest, get involved. I mentioned there's the mailing list for the platform developers. We've got the GitHub issues, pull requests. We have, a lot of ways to get involved directly with the platform. But maybe the platform is just too big. Maybe you have more interest in just helping out JPA and the persistence, and that's great. So go out and take a look, find your project of interest and help them out. So as we're working through the content for Jakarta EE9, if you can help out one of those components reach their goals, then that's going to help us reach the Jakarta EE9 goals. Okay, so this is where we are looking for a lot of community involvement. I've got links out there for all of the Eclipse projects, all of the GitHub repositories, the PMC, I should mention that. We do have a project management committee. I am part of that along with several other people. And they don't decide the direction of Jakarta EE8. They're more in place to help with the guidance of the process related to Eclipse and all of the things that we're doing for Jakarta EE. But that's another good mailing list to participate on and at least to listen in, because you can kind of see, what's the overall feeling and flow of the whole Jakarta EE project. And then, of course, we have a very active community mailing list. This is where, the wild hairs, the wild ideas, they first come up. And through that discussion, then maybe that will feed back into the platform and says, okay, look, this was a good idea. We got to do something along these lines, and we can pull that information out of the community mailing list, feed it into the platform, and hopefully move from there. Okay, so that pretty much covers my presentation. I'm just a couple minutes ahead of schedule here. So let me just take a look. Okay, so I don't have access to the questions anymore because I got out of the live stream. So are there questions that Tanya or Adam could repeat if there's something that I need to cover?
Okay, so one of the questions is there already are there already some plans of Jakarta EE Eclipse board to drop and deprecate some of the Jakarta EE specifications? And if so, how I can sell to my clients which plan to use new Jakarta EE features?
Okay, so right now there is nothing definitely in plan for dropping any of the features. So right now there's nothing that I could point at that would say that we are, dropping anything. I think that's where we are looking for input. I guess I was kind of emphasizing the developer input, but we really need the customer input as well. So I know a lot of people on the call are, consultants, and they work with many different customers. It would be good to start talking with them and finding out, well, what kind of impact are they willing to accept? Whether it's dropping some of these older stable features, doing the big bang versus the incremental, any of that input from real customer bases, that would be very helpful in helping us decide the direction.
Thanks, Kevin. I'll read another one. Is there any intel about how fast Eclipse Foundation wants to make Jakarta EE evolve? Will it follow the idea behind the 6 months release cycle of Java SE?
Yeah, so I don't know that we would be able to keep up with a 6-month release cycle, but I know that we have talked about at least having one major release per year. That's what our goal was. Now that we have the processes in place and we've been able to release Jakarta EE8, now, we can actually start moving a little bit quicker than what we have in the past. I'm kind of using this as an out. but we really do rely on the community input. And so if we do get a lot of activity and input and participation, then we can do these releases in a more timely, more reasonable manner.
Can you please clarify situation with the Java SE Jakarta EE version compatibility? Is there any limitation or recommendations? For example, since version 11, Java removes EE packages from Java XML WS, Java XML bind and transactions, but last ones still do not include to EE. I'm not sure I'm totally following this question.
Nope, I do.
Yeah, okay. As the result, it's just the way it's written, so I'm reinterpreting a little bit. As a result, additional dependencies which are not true EE way as well. So it is a good idea to do migration to SE11 and EE8, or make sense to wait something.
Okay, so that was a long question.
It's a long question.
But I got the gist of it. So because Java EE8 was dependent on Java SE8, we are doing the same thing for Jakarta EE8. So the minimum requirement is Java SE8. That's what the requirement is for Jakarta EE8. Some application servers do support newer versions of Java SE. I know, personal experience with Open Liberty, I know we do support Java SE11. Now, the other app servers that come along, I don't know. I don't know what their plans are, but I can tell you about Open Liberty. The support for Java SE versions after Java SE8, that definitely is one of our considerations for Jakarta EE9. We have to look at that because, like the questioner mentioned, there are some packages that were removed from Java SE11, and we have to allow for that in our definition for Jakarta EE9 going forward. So the situation we already have documented in various issues on the platform. So I know, we're going to have it in our backlog as we move forward. And so it's a known situation that we're going to have to address.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. The questions are coming in, and just to let everyone know, the community is out there also monitoring the chat. And I see many questions that are being posted in the chat are already being answered. So thanks everyone for pitching in. It's a true open source and community-driven event, as we appreciate. In the Ask Questions section, let me find another one. Tell us about the Java EE Jakarta Skeleton framework. Are you, do you have plan to introduce application skeleton framework for quick application development? Okay, so the skeletal format for the specifications, that was just kind of like an interim solution so that we would have consistent specifications for all of these components that are lacking the meat of the actual source that will be coming from Oracle. So that's the only reason that we have the skeletal specification in place. As far as applications, skeletons, templates for applications, I would say that's probably outside. This is me speaking. It's probably outside the scope of Jakarta EE, but maybe as part of the IDEs that will be providing support for Jakarta EE8 down the road. So maybe that's something that they can be looking at. I don't know that we as a platform want to define it. Maybe there's some things that we have to define to put limitations in place, but we don't want to be defining regulations or requirements for tools per se. The next one, are TCKs open to contribution? Yes, they are. All of the source code is in GitHub repositories.
anybody can download them and take a look at them, modify them themselves. If there are problems with them, they can be submitted as issues or pull requests. That's the neat thing with this, is that it is completely open and you are able to contribute. If there's missing test cases, that's one thing that we find quite often as we're going through that. We've got a large customer base with Liberty, and they find things that just were not tested with the TCK, but the specification says that, well, now it'll be easy for us to contribute that type of test back to the TCK and continue to improve it.
Great. Can we go production with Jakarta EE8?
Certainly.
We already did, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, even Open Liberty is a ready for production, application server. We actually tested, the version that we tested is about 3-4 months old. But that's the one that we started with. So that's the one that we stuck with, but that's fully ready for production use. So yes, Jakarta EE8 is ready for production.
Are there any plans to add JDO to Umbrella?
I have not heard of any. It doesn't mean that it can't be. There's another case of where something could be requested, but I have not heard of anybody requesting JDO support.
Okay. And then we'll just do the last one. What are your favorite new features of Jakarta EE specifications? What can we expect in the next future release?
Well, okay, so that if you would have just stopped to say what's your favorite new feature of Jakarta EE8, I would have to say part of the process, and the process that I like is the TCK process, and having that TCK open so that we can discuss it as a group and determine the content, the testing, the environment that's required. The ones that are on the call that are from the specification committee, what I'm referring to right at the end when we were trying to figure out the TCKs, and because everything was open and we had a good discussion on it, we came to a suitable resolution that satisfied everybody that was participating. And it just this is perfect. This is why we're doing everything in the open, and it worked out very well.
So at this point, because we're 2 minutes from the next session, I would like to thank Kevin. This is an amazing opening session. Thank everyone for joining the session and all the questions. And I'd like to invite people to move on to the next session, which is with Josh Juno. And then we'll let Kevin to have his coffee from JakartaOne Livestream mug with his Jakarta EE t-shirt on. So yes, thank you, Kevin. Thank you. So thanks, everyone. I will end the broadcast, and the recording will be available very shortly as well. And we'll talk about that in the upcoming sessions. See you in the next session. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Tanya. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.